Story 1. I work in a small production facility, and our assembly positions are considered unskilled, as anyone could walk in off the street and become competent within a shift. I am a manager and can do basically everything, but I have a production employee who can assemble 3 times faster than me while also taking breaks and watching videos. He earns a handsome performance bonus every month. Story 2. Anything public-facing requires a lot of patience and mental fortitude. Dealing with the general public demands strong emotional resilience. Story 3. You don't just show up to a construction site as an unskilled laborer and start thriving, especially without any experience. Being physically strong doesn't automatically mean success either. I remember being a teenager and watching a high school football player join our crew. He was twice my size, but he was winded in no time. That's when I learned there are different kinds of strength, and more importantly, being smart on the job will outwork brute strength every time. I didn't have a six-pack or anything, but I knew how to grab the cinder blocks and move them. He saw us moving 2 at a time, 1 in each hand, and he thought that because he was bigger, he could grab 4. It didn't work out, and he looked foolish. He became annoyed that I, a scrawny teenager, was driving the forklift and giving him directions. But the reality was I had the skills he didn't. I was more valuable to the boss, so he got the shovel. Story 4. Home health aides have extensive knowledge of what to do when a patient has a seizure or stroke, as well as a wide range of skills. Moving another person for tasks such as bathing or wound dressing requires great care and expertise. They also provide support for individuals dealing with dementia. Story 5. There is a reason you have to be forklift certified. 7-ton machines with forks that will tip right over with or without a load if you are not careful. Also, you will be surprised how hard it is to find someone competent in a pick and pack warehouse as a general laborer. Story 6. Keep in mind, unskilled does not mean anyone can walk in off the street and do it. It means up to a month of training is necessary. Skilled means over 6 months of training is needed. Story 7. In this type of job, most people can reach 80% of an experienced worker's competence within a few shifts and achieve full mastery within a month. Story 8. Pretty much all retail and customer service jobs. It takes a remarkable amount of skill to maintain immense patience when dealing with the challenges people face on a daily basis. Story 9. Serving tables involves juggling orders, reading people, managing stress, staying polite under pressure, and doing it all quickly and with a smile. It requires emotional labor and expert-level multitasking. Story 10. Waitressing. My mom has been a waitress for most of her career. She works for a small, locally owned restaurant that is incredibly popular. They get lines out the door, and people will wait 30 to 45 minutes to eat. They were supposed to be featured on diners, drive-ins, and dives, but the owner refused for reasons unknown. The free publicity would have been huge, I imagine. Anyway, my mom works very hard at that restaurant, making minimum wage plus tips. She waits tables, works the counter, operates the register, and does the dishes because there is no dishwasher. It is very hard. Everything is handwritten, there is no air conditioning, she is usually alone, and works 45 to 50 hours a week in 4 days, open to close. Plus, all the side work required, like clearing tables and rolling silverware. She told me she averages about $45 per hour with tips, which seems impressive considering it is a job that requires no formal education, no trade school or apprenticeship. Just the ability to work hard, be kind, be fast and flexible, multitask, and be able to hold 20 conversations with 30 customers in her head while remembering all their names and do it for 12 hours straight. I believe she deserves every penny and really should make more. It is high stress, fast-paced, hard on her knees and wrists, and half the time her boss does not have enough money in the bank to pay her on time. My stepdad has been very dismissive of her work. He happily takes the money but does not really think it is a real job or that hard. He has become more difficult since 2016. It is a shame because I used to have more respect for him, for raising his kids by himself and working hard to get his life back after his ex-wife gambled away most of his retirement fund. But now I lose respect for him daily. Every time my mom comes over, she has more misogynistic things he has said to her. Someday I hope I make enough money to help her if she needs to escape. I am really proud of her for doing the best with what she had. She struggled with addiction in her 20s, had a serious, long-term relationship that ended because he cheated. She moved to California and restarted her whole life with me and my grandparents, then did it again when she moved back to Washington State. She is resilient, that's for sure. Story 11. Cooking and serving in a high-volume, low-cost restaurant. I tip my hat to any Denny's, International House of Pancakes, Waffle House, or Greasy Spoon type attached to a hotel near a church. Story 12. There are no unskilled jobs, only unskilled people. Most people do not know how to shovel dirt in an efficient way that will not harm their body. Story 13. I worked at a Starbucks that always had a line out the door in college. We rarely had more than 2 people working a shift, so one person was on the register and one person handled everything else. I really loved being the person who handled everything else because you just had to focus, and the shift would fly by. But it required an excellent memory and advanced multitasking skills. Story 14. The person who holds the stop and slow sign during construction when the road is reduced to a single lane. Story 15. Where do I start? Taking an order correctly. Preparing the food correctly. Filling the order correctly. Story 16. Laying underground utilities the proper way involves constantly doing math to figure out slopes, problem solving, tracking materials, and ensuring safe environments for workers by monitoring air quality. It requires negotiation skills when working with inspectors to reach a middle ground on issues. Operators must understand physics when maneuvering swinging excavators near people and have the grit to endure challenging weather conditions. Story 17. Almost anything in agriculture. There are no training or degrees required, but it is a difficult industry to survive in. Very slim margins, extreme volatility, and it requires a very diverse skill set. Those skills include veterinary, fabrication, accounting, mechanical, agronomy, bacteriological, human resources, counseling, and business management, among others. When loads of feed are coming in the driveway at $5,000 each, the weather is conspiring against you, and tractors are parked because of $3,000 parts costs, it is easy to wonder why we do this, just to earn the equivalent of a mediocre wage anywhere else. Story 18. That is truly a contradiction in terms. The definition of skilled labor is jobs that require specialized training. Unskilled labor, which involves no specialized training, is actually rare. Any job that requires a ridiculous amount of skill is certainly skilled labor. Story 19. Forklifting. Being a 15-year veteran on a multitude of different powered industrial vehicles, it seems simple on the outside, but it is more complex than one would think. The biggest difference between me and a newcomer is that I do more work while appearing absolutely bored, which I am. I have an intrinsic relationship with my lift and its fork positioning. I already know my next move before I finish my last move. I have learned not to make mistakes because I absolutely hate cleaning up messes. There is more math involved than one would expect. A 53-foot-tall can with a total of 80,000 pounds before being overweight. Your drive and tandem axles can hold 34,000 pounds each. This includes the weight of the trailer itself. Loading at an entry level requires knowing your product weights and understanding the shiftability and stackability of the product. Your job requires you to load the trailer underweight and secure the load to ensure it does not become overweight. You do not want the product to shift in transit, after all. You have to know how to use the computer to load, use your forklift to load, know the weights and measures of the products you are loading, know how to secure the load, work with any special requirements the customer might have, focus on safety, meet production rates, and handle various other small tasks that arise. It is a fast-paced, stressful job. At its base, it involves moving things from point A to point B, but it is so much more than that. Story 20. Dishwashing at a Mexican restaurant requires a lot of creativity when it is busy. Stack the dishes, spray the sides, pre-spray the silverware, pre-soak the pots and pans to loosen the beans, and use a paint scraper on the pots. It is truly an optimization problem. Story 21. Waffle House has you learning a magic marker system where you place jelly, ketchup, mustard, mayonnaise packets, tomatoes, pickles, cheese, bits of hash browns, and other food items at various positions on a plate, sometimes upside down, to indicate what is supposed to go on it. I think this started as a workaround to be able to hire illiterate people, but honestly, this system is probably harder than just teaching people to read. Story 22. Welding is simple. All you have to do is push a button. However, everything else can cause problems, such as finding the perfect settings, the correct position of the torch, and the right speed to move the torch. I lost my job when another company bought my workplace. I had to teach welding to 2 workers who had never welded before. It was interesting. Story 23. There is no such thing as unskilled labor. There is labor. All jobs require skill, even those that seem easy from the outside. I have over a decade of retail, warehouse, and kitchen work experience. People who think it is easy or that I only deserve minimum wage or look down on unskilled jobs likely would not last a week in one. Story 24. People here seem to be confused about what unskilled means with respect to a job. It does not mean that no skill is required. It means that many people can acquire those skills easily enough. Yes, it takes skill to drive a truck, but it takes a lot more skill to become a doctor. Story 25. Receptionist. It is a juggling act and requires the ability to multitask. A good receptionist makes it look effortless. A bad one frustrates everyone. Story 26. A lot of factory work involves more than just carrying things from one place to another. For example, I worked 2 positions at a hip replacement factory. Working the grinder, you need to remove all the cracks caused by stretching the material, but you cannot remove too much material or it will not fit the dies to be shaped correctly. If you do not remove enough, you have to rework the entire batch. In some cases, you cannot remove too much either, because then it becomes even harder to fit the final piece in the die. This was in the first step where there was the most leeway. I worked in the press area. You have to warm the billets hot enough to stretch, and spray enough lubricant to get the billet out in a timely manner, but not too much or it will become misshapen. You have to go fast enough so the billet doesn't get too hot and to meet the quota, but you cannot go so fast that the billet misaligns with the die, or else it will be unusable. It may be easy, but that does not mean it is simple. Story 27. Disability support work involves personal care, medications, and highly individualized behavior management. Often, you are dealing with violent individuals. However, you only receive reports and schedules to guide you. The compensation is very low because few people want to do this work. There is also significant personal liability if you do not follow all the reports. Story 28. A lot of sales jobs require very little experience, but doing them well requires a tremendous amount of skill. Story 29. Drywall. A proper job from hanging to texture is physically demanding. Plus, if you are doing a level 5 finish, it is incredibly difficult and requires a lot of experience and skill to get flawless, flat, and even walls while also having sharp, crisp corners. It becomes even more challenging when people want smooth walls. In my opinion, people do not realize how much skill it takes to do quality work, and it is greatly undervalued. There are many poor quality jobs, but every time I get to paint behind a skilled one, it is impressive. Story 30. I've never done this, but being an actually good line cook is pretty difficult, I think. It is still considered fairly unskilled labor. Imagine having to cook at a Denny's. I can make eggs 5 different ways, but can I do that for 5 or 10 different people quickly and properly while also preparing their other food, and then do that for 8 to 12 hours? I could not do it. I'd make a better waitress, though I would not make a very good waitress either. Story 31. I worked fast food in my teens. Everyone says it is supposed to be an entry-level, low-paying job, but grills, fryers, knives, pressure cookers, and other kitchen tools make it feel like a torture chamber. You are never able to get a decent foothold on the floor because everything is covered in grease and oil, no matter how much you clean. While you are at it, you must go as fast as you can because orders are up and the timer is running. Story 32. I was a line clearance technician, also known as an arborist, for the power company in Oregon. I will admit there was a lot of physical labor involved, but if you plan to live to see the end of each day, there is a tremendous amount of technical knowledge you need to have. Complex rigging of massive trees was required. One small miscalculated cut or rigging point could be fatal. There was never a dull moment in that job for sure. Story 33. Hands down, Being a professional juggler at a circus is often labeled unskilled because it is just throwing things around. However, try keeping 5 flaming torches in the air while riding a unicycle. Story 34. Warehouse worker requires forklift certification, inventory software proficiency, and logistics expertise. Story 35. Residential caregiver, mentor, and coach in a residential treatment center. You supervise clients with various mental health issues, often in crisis, in groups of 5 to 15 at a time. You must have sophisticated relationship skills, a high level of executive functioning, deep knowledge of treating mental health issues, and be resilient at your core. Story 36. Most of them. Unskilled is just what the billionaires call jobs they do not want to pay a livable wage for. Story 37. Cooking. If I hear one more person tell me to get a real job, I might lose it. I have a lot of knives. It is strange how people think it is an unskilled job. Yet they cannot tell you the boiling temperature of water or what a medium rare steak looks like. There is no way they could stand on their feet for 16 hours a day without a break. Yet people still go to restaurants. Story 38. Back in the day, I was a lifeguard. I took swimming lessons for a year, 5 months of lifeguard training, and 3 months of first aid. I was paid 4 cents over minimum wage. Story 39. If you want something done well, hire a professional. If you want something done poorly, hire a teenager. If you want something done next year, do it yourself. No matter what the job is, all require skill to be done well. Story 40. If any job has to be done well enough to pay someone to do it, it is not unskilled. Unskilled labor is just a misleading term used to justify paying the lowest legal wage. Employers would pay less if they could get away with it. Story 41. Housekeeper, line cook, even dishwasher, anything related to hospitality. Garbage collectors operate the dangerous hydraulic machinery. A worker from Newfoundland digging in trenches needs skills to avoid getting buried and dying. Chief executive officers primarily need skills in networking, relationship building, and negotiation. Story 42. Unskilled means no formal training is required before beginning the work. It does not mean you have no skills. Stop taking things so literally. Story 43. Every job requires a certain amount of skill to perform well. Some people choose not to obtain those skills, but this happens with any job. I work in information technology, so that is where my skill base is focused. One of my friends owns a landscaping business. He has a lot of skill when it comes to landscaping, but he is also a business owner and good at those skills as well. I might be able to develop landscaping skills, but I would not be a good business owner, and I do not want to develop those skills. I do not want to deal with employees, managing finances, or handling customers. Story 44. During contract negotiations for a major city transit service, we operators were told that we were unskilled labor. It was very galvanizing indeed. We came within 4 hours of walking off the job. Story 45. Delivery driving is arguably one of the lowest skill meaningful jobs. You still have to know how to drive, use a map or global positioning system, and handle finding locations that might not be labeled clearly. Navigating unknown areas efficiently, managing time, and staying safe under stress requires both technical and soft skills. Story 46. Most construction jobs. Specifically, I did stucco for several years, and good plasterers are nothing short of artists. We were usually on site around the same time as the drywall workers, and they are equally talented. Story 47. A friend of mine is an aircraft mechanic at a major metropolitan airport in the United States. Legally, he and his coworkers are considered unskilled because they refer to manuals when repairing the aircraft. He also has a 4-year degree from a prestigious school in the United States for that work. Story 48. Front desk hospital and clinic workers schedule patients, check them in, and process payments, sometimes using multiple systems for more than 2 providers. Story 49. Talent strategy and management. Negotiating is not as easy as people think. It is a learned skill that requires practice in real-world scenarios to improve. Story 50. I worked in a supermarket delicatessen through college and now work in advanced supply chain management. The key point is that any individual task is not rocket science. The skill lies in balancing and multitasking. Story 51. Operating a McDonald's restaurant at high capacity. Story 52. All of them. Every job requires skill. They call it unskilled labor to justify paying you less. Story 53. Fast food. Managing 12 drive-through orders, fry baskets, angry customers, and broken machines while earning less than someone selling crystals on Etsy. It is multitasking hell with a headset. Story 54. Being a postal clerk, you need to remember United States Postal Service policies, Department of Transportation hazardous materials policies, and if you work at a passport office, Department of State policies as well. Story 55. I am a tennis racket stringer, and it takes a lot of practice to produce consistent stringing jobs in under 20 minutes. Story 56. Lower-paid workers in particular are not going to avoid jobs that involve various forms of emotional and physical exhaustion, unfortunately. Story 57. I will always respect customer service and social service jobs. It takes a lot of mental fortitude to deal with other human beings, sometimes at their worst and most entitled. They are way too underpaid for the service they provide to society. Story 58. Basically, every job considered unskilled requires a significant amount of skill to perform well. However, it is quite easy to be bad at almost any job. Story 59. Unskilled work means we teach the job on site. A skilled McDonald's team is much faster and delivers better quality than teenagers in a typical location. If you ever wonder how they achieve target times and quality standards, they typically use the top-performing locations as the standard. Story 60. People are focusing on customer service for the interpersonal skills aspect, which is correct, but there is also the technical skill. While managing an angry customer, can you look up their information across 3 databases while taking notes in a 4th? Can you troubleshoot with new information from the developers while using new language from marketing? It is a lot. Story 61. The majority of these jobs, just because they have a low barrier to entry, do not require a lack of skill. The skill in these jobs lies in learning how to perform tasks at a high quality without cutting corners. That is where true skill comes into play. Story 62. A live cook preparing a la carte dishes made from scratch. People act like cooking is the easiest thing to do, yet their food is often poor quality for a supposedly professional. Story 63. An actual locksmith. By that, I mean not the scammer type who specializes in drilling out your simple lock and replacing it with an outrageously priced, low-quality lock. A good locksmith can figure out a way to fix just about anything on a door. The same applies to a safe technician. Story 64. I work as a stagehand. We build live theatrical shows and also work backstage moving scenery, etc. It is considered unskilled labor. Realistically, you need excellent memory, the ability to work independently and in a team, physical coordination, and a healthy level of problem solving. Most of the best stagehands are carpenters as well, which is usually learned on the job. We climb, assemble automation, build, paint, and do it all quickly and efficiently. It is unskilled labor, yet some of us are flown around the world to install shows or teach show plots. Sometimes I am flown around the country just to direct how to pack a truck. That being said, some people never really pick it up and do not understand why they do not get work. Story 65. Being a radiologic technologist, most people think of the job as just being a button pusher, but there is much more to it than pushing the exposure button. You have to know your anatomy, your techniques, and how to obtain complementary images if a patient cannot maintain protocol positions. The school is truly the worst part, though. When you have been doing it for a while, the job is not too bad. Story 66. At my old job, we had one requirement for anyone looking for an unskilled labor job. Everyone was asked if they could read a tape measure during their interview. There was no actual proof needed to show this skill, but some people hesitated when asked. I worked at a steel processing shop. The largest portion of our work was basic cut-to-length beams, channels, angles, and similar items. People do not know the principle of measure twice, cut once, mainly because they do not know how to properly use a tape measure. Our crew was about 30 people in total, with 15 on the first shift and 15 on the second shift. When the plant opened, during the first 6 months, They went through over 300 people trying to fill those positions. Unskilled labor should possess some basic skills that are useful in everyday life. Story 67. Additional learning support in further education. Wildly underpaid and underappreciated. Passionate, qualified people who are churned through because their employer or curriculum areas do not understand the amount of work needed to help special educational needs and disabilities learners achieve. Story 68. Being great at any physical activity. Digging, especially concrete underpinning. Livestock work. Meat boning and slicing in abattoirs. Metalworking. Some types of arborist work. Welding. Factory work. Operating cranes. Operating excavators. Sales. People who do unskilled jobs are often highly intelligent, but were dyslexic or had attention deficit hyperactivity disorder or found offices boring or school dull or didn't have options. Manual and situational intelligence are currently undervalued. Story 69. Digging ditches and holes. If you have ever watched someone who does not know how to dig, you will understand. I once saw someone digging poorly and asked when they were going to get the bar. "What is a bar?" was the response. I finished the hole. Story 70. Pretty much all of them are easy skills to learn and master. You can bring almost anyone off the street, and they would take a bit of time to figure it out, but it would not take long to master them. The fact that you do not need prior knowledge before starting the job is what makes these unskilled jobs. This does not mean you can be careless and just muddle your way through them. Story 71. Aircraft mechanic. I guess 2 years of school, where every hour is tracked by the federal government plus a government license, is not a skilled job. Thanks a bunch for sticking around till the end of the video. Remember to subscribe, and until next time, stay awesome and goodbye.